Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are here with Aaron Shaw. He is mentor and a business coach. And welcome, Aaron. Let's start with your brief introduction, and then we can start our show.
Great. Well, again, my name is Aaron Shaw, and I'm an occupational therapist, certified hand therapist, and certified strength and conditioning specialist. So I'm kind of a nerd. I love everything about the body and function, from rehabilitation to performance. I've been in practice for 24 years now, and about 5 years ago, not quite 5 years ago, I opened up my own practice. And as of today, my practice, which is called MoveMend, you can find me at movemend.info. And my practice has physical therapy, occupational therapy, personal training with a specialty in post-injury personal training. We have massage and of course our support staff and director of operations and so on. So here I am.
Okay, I know there's a lot to add on to that, but we'll definitely find out in later of this episode.
Yes.
But let's just start with your journey. Walk us through from how has been your journey been since you graduated to the point you are today.
Well, it's been a long journey. So it was 24 years ago, but I would say when I graduated from occupational therapy school and did my rotations, the biggest thing that I was drawn to was hand therapy. And so I've always really enjoyed in part because I was told it was really complicated and it was really hard to become a certified hand therapist. And so that's kind of what I set my mind to do. And I worked in, typical for probably a new graduate at the time. I worked in, some acute care settings, some neuro rehab settings, did some ICU work, and all along the way, I was always ended up being the guy who made splints and saw some of the traumatic hand cases. And that was great, but then I really kind of doubled down and focused on becoming a certified hand therapist. I was fortunate enough to, partner with some good mentors along the way, give me a lot of clinical advice. I have always been one to devour education. So I've taken a ton of educational courses through the years, as you can imagine. Somewhere in there, I dabbled a little bit with traveling therapy at the time. I did a little bit of work with work injury and return to work and functional capacity evaluations. And all that started on the East Coast. And then through the years, I kind of migrated west and ended up in New Mexico for a year, San Diego for 5 years, and now I'm based in Seattle, where I've been for since 2005. And the big draw to bring me to Seattle was Harborview Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma center. And it was a great opportunity to come up and really, roll up my sleeves in a fast-paced, again, it's a level 1 trauma center, working with hand surgeons, side by side with hand surgeons all the time. And it was awesome. I got to see stuff that you normally don't see even as a CHT. And so replants and reconstructions, and it was a great big boost to my career. During that time, I've given a bunch of, lectured nationally and internationally on hand rehab sort of stuff. I've published in, hand rehab of the handbook, written journal articles, mentored a lot of students, mentored a lot of staff. And it was excellent, but also I felt like I was kind of hitting my head on the ceiling because I wanted to do something better than what I could offer. And the challenge was that I was working with a lot of clients who get nearing kind of the discharge phase, and they would be asking me, well, what should I do for exercises in a month or in 2 months? And, in Seattle, it's a very active community. People are very healthy. People engage in a lot of sports. And at the time, I was an elite level bike racer as well. So I was, if people asked me at the time what I did for a living, I would say, well, I'm a bike racer, but I make my living being a hand therapist. So I recognized that it was hard to transition people from the medical world to kind of the fitness world. And it was hard to know who I could refer to, somebody who's maybe had, an elbow reconstruction, who they've been, cleared to do whatever they want. But the physician may not understand that what this person wants to do is, return to rugby or return to CrossFit or return to something that's really high intensity. And so there has to be some sort of handoff from, you're no longer a medical case perhaps, but it's really hard to find people in the community that understand that it's a blending
The
of services.
follow-ups, yeah.
Yeah. And so what I don't want to do is send somebody in that's going to, maybe with the best of intentions, but a trainer who may end up re-injuring a client, and the client may not know what their limits are. So I recognized that there was a need for something. There's a need to fill that gap. And as the stars sort of aligned, I said, well, I'm tired of the model, the typical model, the medical model, and there has to be something better. And I'm either going to entirely quit medicine altogether, because I was getting tired of it. I was getting tired of begging for visits to take care of people who obviously needed my care. And I was kind of tired of not knowing what to do with this, with a group of these clients who there was no safe place to send them as we were transitioning out. So I had a heart-to-heart with my wife, who suggested that I don't quit my career, which was a wise decision, but instead to reach out to some of my mentors, and had some great conversations, and a lot of took some time to be really insightful about what I was really thinking and what my vision was and what was my passion. And so I decided that instead of quitting my career as a therapist, that I was going to do something on my own, and I was going to do it my way. And so again, that was almost 5 years ago as I stand here right now. And that is when I left Harborview with all of its benefits that I had, which was great. And it started from scratch. And so I hung up a shingle, rented a space, and the idea was, or my tagline I would say, is that I'm changing the model of health and fitness by bridging the gap between rehabilitation and personal training. So yes, I'll provide hand therapy services. And yes, I'm providing some training service as well, but I want to make sure there's some sort of connection between the two, some sort of a system that really holds them together. And that was the birth of what is today what we call physio coaching, where there is this platform, this communication between the two. So I rented a small space and hired my first employee, who was an exercise physiologist. I hired her before I even painted this space. I mean, I literally gutted out what used to be a coffee shop. And my interview was sitting on a box and a ladder on the floor. And I just said, okay, close your eyes and just imagine an amazing space, because you're going to have to imagine it, because it was just a disaster at the time. And I explained to her the vision, like the idea that, there's something that's missing, and I don't want to follow the rules that are like, either medicine or fitness. I want to create our own, something that's different. And so like first, the thing started off, I was the community resource. I had a bunch of people coming in, did a bunch of networking, which worked out really well. I already had some of a reputation in the Seattle area. So I was getting, referrals, which was good. Most of my first referrals were actually from physical therapists who weren't hand therapists, because they wanted to have like an independent hand therapist they could, send somebody to. So that was great. And then after a year, I believe, I had people coming in that were satisfied with their experience with hand cases, and they say, oh, I also have back pain. What should I do for that? Like, first of all, you don't want me to tell you anything about your back because I don't know anything about it. So for a clinic that had their own clinic, and then I decided, well, instead of referring business elsewhere, maybe I should just get my own physical therapist. So I hired a PT, and then it just kind of grew. I mean, it just kind of slowly grew. And the main thing that guides me is creating long-term relationships with my community. And so that is my community of, referral sources, with former clients, with other therapists in town. I don't really look at anything. I don't look at anybody as competition. I mean, there's plenty of people to go around in the city of Seattle. And and so we refer to different clinics if we don't provide a certain service, and we get a lot of referrals from other clinics as well. And it's worked. I mean, it's worked to the point where less than half of our referrals are actually from physicians. So a little over half are just from former clients and relationships that have nothing to do with the physician at all. And so
Impressive.
That, yeah. And so I am the only, or we are the only independently owned therapy practice providing my list of services in Seattle. And so all the rest of them are either, big corporate owned or physician owned. And I mean, there can be pros and cons, to both sides of that. But the reality is, when I sit down with my team, we are the decision making, and sometimes, if a staff member comes up to me and says, what about this, or here's an idea, or what do we do about that? And on the fly, like, we don't have to ask, I'm not asking permission from anybody. It's like, if we think it's a good thing to try, great. The policy is effective right now. And if it doesn't work after a week, okay, we're not doing that. Let's pivot and do something else. And so, it's worked out well. I mean, I've got a full-time marketing team that I work with too, who provides all of our, puts all the pieces together on the back end. So that's stuff that as it's grown, I've obviously had to like take on tasks to start with and then kind of delegate them out because I can't do all things. Yeah, and I still feel, again, we're 5 years, almost 5 years. I'm just barely getting started. There's so many things I want to, continue to grow and build, but
Yeah, see, this is excites you, right? Every time you step in, like inside of your door, it excites you instead of feeling it lagging, dull, or disheartened. You feel excited, energetic, and pumped, and that's what everybody should have in their life, right? But it just takes, I think, a realization, okay, where I want to go and where I actually want to go, kind of thing. So that's what we want to guide people more and more so that they can have things that they are good at it and they would love to do it for the rest of their life, right?
mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about more in detail about that, but another question that I ask everybody is influence of books in your life. So let's talk about some common books that you have, like your life has been impacted.
Dan Kennedy comes to mind. He has a whole list of no BS books on everything from marketing to relationship building. I've Profits First is one that I've just read recently, which is a really good way to kind of think about, especially for people who are just starting out, how to make sure that you are being thoughtful about how you categorize your income and kind of make sure you do take care of yourself first. So there's the kind of that financial side of things. The other one I like that actually relates to the rest of my staff is Strength Finders. So I have all of my staff. So I'm really trying to make sure that I am giving tasks and putting people in roles that where they're most likely to succeed. And so I have everybody do the Strength Finders test, which is started by Gallup. And so it gives, they do a self questionnaire and it gives me kind of the top 4 or 5 strengths. And so a lot of them are, attitudinal and, how they make decisions and what things that they find passionate. So I can make sure that to navigate them towards roles that they come in and they're excited about whatever they're doing. Reading some more recently books on managing, because, I am, one of my hats is I am a people manager. So Gallup also is they're the one who just released a manager book, which something else, I forget the title of it, but it's something about managing people. So those are probably the top ones that come to mind. And I've read or, skimmed through more blog posts and things that I can possibly remember. But most of them, at least at the beginning, I think I was most passionate about was marketing content. And so I listened to, this was years before I even thought about opening up my own practice. I was listening to, I think it's called Small Business, Big Marketing podcast from these guys out in Australia. And so it was just the idea of being a small business, but to have big marketing, like a bigger footprint, for a small guy. And so I love thinking about that because, I'm a small guy on the scale of things. And, I feel like when I come into my practice, I feel like it's this big, massive thing, but on this, I walk out the door and there's other practices who own, 15 locations that are the size of mine. And so, I don't have the budget or, that a lot of these big other institutions do. So I got to figure out, I got to educate myself that much more and, how to navigate that. And there's some great content out there on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Okay,
most
no, that,
importantly, it's devouring content. I think most importantly, it's just like, talking to people, whether it's, books, podcasts, and I mean, really, it gets much more lively if you're in like a true conversational, like a mentoring thing, because then you brainstorm ideas that kind of come
yeah,
up. Sometimes when I read something, and I'm like calling my peers, be like, hey, did you know here's one thing we should try. So it makes you want to kind of like share that experience and pass on the knowledge, and so that's part of the fun.
yeah. And like one thing, like I find is like there's a lot of common books that comes out, and this is my personal experience that like it the books that you read doesn't have to be related to your field, right? Like let's say a finance book, right? The Profit First or Rich Dad Poor Dad, or
Mm-hmm.
like Cash Flow Quadrant or John Maxwell books and kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I read one book on psychology, which helped me to understand patient better. Those are two totally different worlds. Like that person was a Harvard psychologist and he was writing all psychology book, but some part of the text was so much impressive that help how you can read person's brain, how they are, because every second you are getting judged by every person that you're meeting, even by your parents or your kids.
Mm-hmm.
They are like evaluating you kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
how can you beat their evaluation before they beat you kind of thing, right?
Right.
That
I
was
think that
really,
reading outside of our, what you think, I'm a therapist, so I should read therapy books. And I feel like,
yeah.
I've read a bunch of therapy books. Another one that just came to mind, which was an audio book, was Never Split the Difference,
Mm-hmm.
which is one on kind of
Yeah,
negotiating. And
I've read
you
that.
heard that? It's,
Mm-hmm.
that was a great, again, is it practical as I sit here and I make a splint for somebody, not entirely, but from, collaborating with, physicians and staff and contracts, and I mean every interaction is a negotiation of sorts. And so I think
Yeah.
like there's, for that particular book, the idea was uh, cutting it in half and splitting the pie isn't necessarily a good deal, because maybe you can split the
Yeah.
pie at all, or maybe it shouldn't be quite
No,
50-50. So it's
I think that book has a real life experience in my life because I like negotiated my salary a couple of down years, like I think 4 years ago. This was like when I moved from New York to Dallas, and it was my first job here in Dallas, and that helped me to rethink it. That okay, splitting down a difference, it's not going to be because the guy was halfway, I was halfway, but then I renegotiated the 75% of what he said no, kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
right? But the strategy he says is make him feel that he's winning, and then in
Exactly.
that process you win, right? So that was
Exactly.
really handy and helpful, and I made like $25,000 extra just by doing that. And that was a $7
So you
book,
should
by
read
the
the
way.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was a $7 book.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well
So
spent.
yeah, that always helps, and like one thing I would like to add is like, there's so much value in book, like a $10 book that you will not even find in $2,500 seminar. Of
For
course,
sure.
there are great seminars, there are, some great people doing great hands-on thing, but even like $7 book or a $10, $12 book has so much caliber or so much information that can change your life in $10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
For
agree.
sure.
And I think that one thing that I've had to really work on is also just take time to digest the material that I read. And so it's easy, there's so much information out there that it's easy to get lost in, like, just sort of like getting to the next book or the next podcast, the next audio book, but realizing like there's only so much headspace, and especially for those of us that are running a full practice at the same time, that some of my best ideas, like sort of like the integration of that information, comes when I don't have a book in front of me and I'm not at work. And for me, it's like, I run, one of the things I like to do. So when I'm, going for a run, or I'm sitting out on my patio and just intentionally saying, I don't want to try to think about anything, but that's when great ideas, like things start to kind of click and come together. And I wasn't trying to think about this, but I came up with a good idea. And so we kind of also need to give ourselves some headspace and just some time to let whatever's in here to kind of
Yeah.
shape up into whatever it's going to be, so you can execute
like
it.
I call it the recreational thing, like, so anything that is not related, to your normal life, and then, you will find that there, like your brain will find like a way to relate that non-essential thing to your essential thing kind of thing, you
Yep.
know.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny. Like
So
when
there's
I,
always a
if
bridge.
I'm, yeah, when I'm traveling with my wife, sometimes I'll say, "Oh, that reminds me of, this," and the question's like, "How does that remind you of?" It's nothing to do with your work, but I'm like, somehow it just makes it click. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about like people's expectation that, oh, you should be doing 9 to 5 job, and then ultimately leads to dissatisfaction and burnout. So let's hear your take on that.
yeah. So I think there's a job for everybody. I think there's sometimes, and I look back at the earlier part of my career where I didn't recognize that there was even options for me. And when I was in school, I was never given a course on entrepreneurialism. And so it was like, here's a skill set, here's your basic toolbox, go out and then basically have somebody tell you what to do and how to use your tools. When I think that, if for those of us that say, hey, especially over time when we develop, our toolbox becomes much more valuable. How can I leverage this toolbox that I've developed on my own, or developed through school and then, clinical practice. And so I just don't, for me, I was not satisfied with using my tools in previous settings. And so it was a good match at the time, but I felt like my toolbox started to kind of outgrow how I could even apply that. And so, again, my example with the services that we're providing now, which is, again, both OT and PT and coach and, strength coaching under the model of physio coaching, I had all of these tools in my toolbox for a while, but I couldn't actually use them in the 9 to 5 Monday through Friday world. I had to kind of extricate myself from that and say, I'm going to use these things in a different way. The more I use them, actually, the more tools I get over time. And the 9 to 5, punching in, punching out, it put a ceiling on what I could do. I could be very successful underneath that, but to be clear, like this is as good as I could possibly get. And it was, again, playing by somebody else's rules. And for a period of time that was okay. But then I get to the point where I still have a long career ahead of me. I just couldn't imagine like, what in the heck am I going to do? Because I can't sustain this. Like, I'm just not going to be satisfied. And my growth was, and so I had to step away from that and say, well, here are some things that I value. And I value, those are my time. I'm going to definitely value income and money. So I like to have the opportunity to not hit my head here. I want to make my own decisions, and I'll make good decisions and I'll make bad decisions, but I just at least want to have the opportunity to make those decisions. But in order to fulfill those things that I find valuable, I had to step out. And of course, with that, I think there is a little bit of uncertainty because there's perhaps comfort in, as long as I stay in this box, I'm following these rules and there's a little bit of a safety net. But for a lot of us, and probably a lot of us that, watch these programs with you are watching because, I feel like there's something outside of that, and to recognize that if you really do a self-assessment, and that's what I talked about with my coaching clients is, do a self-assessment of what you really, really value. And oftentimes you realize that in order to really have fulfillment with those values, you're better off kind of going out on your own. Because, right now I do make my own rules. And so again, one of my biggest values is my time. And so I decided I don't want to work Mondays. So I stopped working Mondays. My wife goes on a trip and I want to go with, for a business trip. And I decide like, well, okay, I want to go with you. So that is freedom that I didn't have when I was in this previous box, because I had to ask for time off and I had to negotiate it with my peers and who's going to be off next week. And I don't have to negotiate any of that now, because as the business owner, I do kind of what I want with that. So that was a huge value to me. And again, I'm standing here talking to you at my clinic and patients are being treated outside this door, but this is cool because this is what I want to be doing with my time right now. But, when I'm the 9 to 5 working, punching in, punching out for somebody else, that's not an option on my plate. So.
And like, more and more people that I talk to, there's a typical pattern that I find is at one point in your life, where, especially when you're doing 9 to 5, is your brain or your, the toolbox that you have is going to outgrow the settings that you're working on, right? And
Mhm.
that's where either you get out, or if you get like if you cannot, you will lead to like dissatisfaction, burnout, and all kind of thing, because then you will start thinking, okay, I have these things, but what I'm doing is just lifting the patient and putting it in a you know doing a commode transfer in a nursing home, or all
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
stationary job kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
So it will not allow you to do something that is meaningful to you, and will open up your brain in a creative way that will make you more curious that, okay, let's what is more out there in the market, let's find out kind of thing.
Mhm.
But of course, like
Yeah,
starting out is always the painful process, the most painful, I would say.
for
And
sure.
the uncertain part of the entrepreneurial journey is like you will not find out the second step unless you take the first one.
Yep.
Nobody
That,
is like god enough to find out that second step or third step before taking the first one. So if you want to make the
exactly.
change, you take that first step and find out which one is second one, right?
Exactly. There's, I've given several kind of top five lists on, different educational things I've given on things to do to start your own practice and things you can do to, go out on your own. And, the bottom of whatever these top five lists are always just start. Take that for like, yes, you have to plan, and, you got to be thoughtful and have your vision and set some goals and like finance, you got to do all that stuff. But I promise you, the saying that 80% is good enough, you can get to 80% in a fixed amount of time to do planning. It will take you a million years to be 100 to the point where you think you're 100% correct. And it's
Yeah,
going to be a waste, because no matter how much you plan, it's going
yeah.
to be a little bit different. And
And
so
there's never
you,
100%.
no. And so um, it's this, there is something about, and I think back to, that's kind of what got me started. Is I just put a line in the sand. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. It's sort of like make my, it's do or dare. I put against myself. So I'm playing chicken with myself, I guess. Um, but to put myself in a position where, like, okay, the day that, I walk into my job and I gave my notice, and my boss tried to talk me out of it, and I said, no, I'm leaving. It's been great, good terms, but I'm out of here next month. And I walk out that door, all of a sudden I realize, like, oh my gosh, I just quit my job.
Yeah,
But then it gets real. And then, but I had to start. And then when I started looking at doing SEO for my first website, and the guy who was working doing SEO with, and he said, you need to start doing some blog content, and, so you can start getting some, some hits on some traffic into your website. I was like, well, I don't know, what should I write on? What do you think's good? And he just said, well, just write something. And I realized, like, oh, I just had to start. Just do one. Just start with one thing. Do it. Get it done. Is it perfect? No. In fact, it's guaranteed to be mediocre. The first one's always going to be mediocre. So hurry up and do it, because it will get better on the second one. So, but you
yeah,
just need to, like, start, and that's the hardest. That's the hardest, probably the hardest part. But what's
yeah,
most fulfilling is you do that start, and then you realize you're on a journey, and that journey, I mean, that is, like, when you're following what you really value and what your vision is, and to create something that is in your head, and you're creating that, the journey is like a drug. I mean, it is like, that is what's so exciting. And yes, there are ups and downs and stresses and good days and bad days, but every day I get up and it is like, I'm on my journey, and it's an adventure, and it's mine. I'm not in this little box. It's like, well, I'm going to be banging my head up against the ceiling all day. And so I wish more therapists would go out on their own and do this.
yeah. No, I think like that's what we're trying to do is try to learn from these things, because you have to start at some point. That is the the point of this discussion is that no matter what you do, you have to start. That is the first thing. And 50% of the mistake that people will do will be most likely similar or common, right? So learn from others' mistake, but you still will have 50% of your share of
Mm-hmm.
mistake that you cannot find in books, you cannot find in somebody else. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
make those mistakes and learn from
Mm-hmm.
it, right?
Yeah, I think that it's just that it is, don't make the mistake that somebody else can. I mean, whenever I have coaching clients and we brainstorm through some things, I don't make the last decision. Everybody can make their own decision, but I can it's fun to share my experience and say, you might not want to do that because I tried that already and it wasn't good. And so you can, but make no mistake, it might be a bumpy ride for you. And so it feels good to help people navigate, away from like the landmines along the way. And it's super exciting to me. Again, now as a, business coach and a business owner, like I enjoy treating clients. I mean, as much as anybody probably could, but at the same time, I actually get much more satisfaction out of hearing success stories from other business owners, from my staff. And I mean, one of the best compliments I had was, so I'm in my second location now, but it was probably a year into owning my first practice. And so at that time I had, one or two personal trainers and other physical therapists. And of course, when the practice starts, it's mostly about people who know me in some way. And this person came in, I saw, I never met the person. They came in and out once or twice. And on their way out one time, I said, "Hey, how did everything go?" They said, "Oh, great. I love it here. How long have you been here? Like, how long have you been working here?" And I was like, "Oh, you don't even know who I am?" Like, that was the biggest, like, that means you're not here because somebody told you to go see Aaron Shaw or go to see Aaron's practice. It was like my business had now sort of taken a life of its own and somebody was having a great experience that had nothing directly to do with, or not, it was more than 1 degree of separation. That was like $1 million.
That's a definition of business, like a business, there's a lot of misconcept, like there's a book, I forgot the name, but,
The
are
E-Myth.
you really owning a business kind of thing? Or are you
Yeah.
still being like, employee business thing? And 50% of businesses are still employee-based business. Like the day you don't work, that business is not working. So, those types of business are not business typically. It's still self-employed, thing. But so I'm really curious to know your transition from, like doing out your therapy thing to being a business coach.
Well, I think part of it was one my clinical skills I've been doing for a very long time. My track record of owning an actual brick and mortar practice is now 5 years in. Before that, I dabbled a little bit with working for myself before I moved up to Seattle, doing contract work under my own business name, and had one employee at the time. So I would say I have a fair amount of experience, and I think that part of what leads me to be able to give coaching advice in part is because I've received so much coaching. And so as far as, to me, it's sort of like clinical skills. It's hard to be a new graduate and to teach clinical skills to other people because you don't really have much experience. I mean, maybe you've read the same books, but until you've treated, your first 100 elbow dislocations, do you finally realize like, oh, I actually have a clinical track record, so I feel better, teaching people about it from my experience. And so, so the same things happened over the past several years as I've gone from, a person with an idea, a concept, and taken that concept from, this fuzzy thing that was in my head to an actual reality. And it is easier said than done for sure. But I feel like because I realize now, like being an entrepreneur, I'm not born with special powers. I don't have any special muscle or any special part of my brain. I'm just a regular guy. And there are regular people out there who feel like, even when they, you see a business, oh my goodness, it must be nice. Oh, that's crazy that they did that. And the reality as I stand here is, no, it's not. I mean, it takes some, thoughtful planning and some bold moves. But if I can do it, I assure you, anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. And now I'm in a position to kind of, my proof of concept is that I'm standing here talking to you. So again, I had an idea, and it's an idea that's existing today, and it's an idea that's existing when I'm either talking to you, or if I don't work on Mondays, and if I leave town for a week or two, my business is still going. People are still getting taken care of. People are getting amazing service. And if I can do it, my scale of influence grows as my staff grows, and it's exponential. If I can teach one other therapist to do the same thing, like follow your dreams and, scale yourself, because you can only be in one place at one time. And again, talking about burnout, you can, if you're not designed to be in that 9 to 5 for a 40-year career, I think it's important to scale yourself, and again, talking about that e-myth of, I still want, my whole career is based on helping people, but I can actually help more people by coaching a person who wants to be an entrepreneur, and they can scale that and they can help their group of people. And so that one-to-one interaction has more scale than the one person that's sitting at my treatment table. That's literally one-to-one, and then it's done. I want to do one to many. And so coaching enables me to do that, just like hiring PTs and OTs allows me to do that. So I've got amazing clinical staff that I don't have to fix everybody that walks in the door. And so it's been fun. I mean, I think it's cool to see other people go from an idea to, hey, I've got my first client, or I signed my first insurance contract, or I got my first week under my belt, or I just signed a lease for a space. And, 6 months ago, I didn't think that was possible. I was afraid to make that first step. And so it's cool to really empower people to make things real. Because I think that everybody has, and we all know this as business owners, like everybody has ideas and opinions on things. You know what you should do? You should do this. You know what you should do? You should do this. It's like, yeah, I didn't ask, but thank you for telling me what you think I should do. It's from the comfort of your couch, from the comfort of where you're sitting. And it's fun to kind of say, no, actually you can do this. You can do this, and to help people navigate that is cool. And again, I just wish, as it is as we get older, of course, that I wish I knew then what I know now. And I would have, the only regret I have for this whole experience is I wish I started it 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And so I think the longer you wait, it's kind of lost time, especially, if you're sitting in a place where you're like, I'm not totally satisfied with what I'm doing. I'm not really sure what I want to do next, but this little box is kind of out where I feel like I want to get out and do something. Well, don't take the next year thinking about it. There are ways to kind of start the process. And so sometimes, working with a coach is just starting the process, and so, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about my practice. In fact, I formed my LLC a year before I actually opened up the doors. And even before I formed the LLC, I already had, a year of kind of percolating ideas, but, so that takes time. And so I think that sometimes, getting a coach actually holds you a little bit accountable. And so it's nice to kind of say, okay, if your spouse or your friends are kind of saying, you keep talking about this idea, are you ever going to actually do it or not? Yeah, you should talk to somebody.
I think journey will be a lot more smoother. Okay. Like there's no guarantee it won't be bumpy, but like right. Having a mentor or having a guide who has already done it. And mm-hmm. if they have done it exact same thing, what, somebody wants to pursue, that's the best match. But even if not similar, it's still a good match because they will have those experiences that you will encounter later on in the journey. So the business coaching, I personally feel like mentor and business coaching does work, but you just have to know the right people. You cannot just be doing with anyone and everyone who is popping out the Facebook. And, like this is like really funny. They make 5-second video kind of thing. Uh-huh. I'm sure everybody has watch it, and like they're just like makes me laugh. Like okay, another guy.
Yeah, I think that the other thing to think about with getting coaches. So I have two. One of them is clinical, and one of them is business. And so it was just to kind of a friend of the family, the business one. And this person has no idea about the healthcare space. He's purely in entrepreneurial business, something or other. He's a professor somewhere on the East Coast. And so it was great because he would ask a lot of really hard questions about, again, he's doesn't come in with a bias of like, this is how healthcare works. Here's the, good, bad. So one of the first things he says to me is, oh, well, you've been doing this for a long time. You've got a great resume. Why don't you raise your rates? Like, oh, you're mistaken. I can't raise my rates. The insurance tells me how much I get. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, right, I know. And so, which is the whole other discussion, a whole other problem with the healthcare system. But it was good because, you know, as I stand here now, 30 to 40% of my practice is cash. And so that's pretty atypical for a therapy-based practice. But it's because like I'm leaving gradually and thoughtfully, planning, you know, this sort of like separation, at least in part, eventually all from insurance. And so, you know, frankly, insurance can't pay me enough at this point. Like you know, they're underpaid for what I do for a service. But having that coach that can kind of ask those hard questions and really kind of make me look like, why don't I, like, no, of course I'm underpaid, I'm undervalued. So I can't change those rules. So we work together and like, okay, so what's a different model you can even, where you can call the shots? And so cash pay, physio coaching, personal training, massage. So I've got all these other services. One of my 3 PTs is purely cash based. So it's like, okay, now we're like dissecting ourselves out. But having that purely business perspective was really good. While on the other hand, one of my mentors owns a practice herself. And so like, you know, we can really commiserate on something. So
no, like it's always important to have that kind of person around you. You know, we are like kind of afraid always to face those questions. And when somebody that you trust asks you the question, you know, it literally pierces through your body, you know, kind of thing, because it's your clinic. So it's your baby. You want to protect it and you want to be nice to it. And, you know, sometimes like those harsh questions is needed.
For
sure.
You know,
kind of hammering it down.
I would get nervous, and I would joke with my wife about this before my coaching calls when I was being, you know, having these on the receiving end of being coached. And it's funny to just I'm like going into the lion's den because I know that I trust this person. They're going to give me straight up honest advice, you know, unbiased, and it's going to be valuable. But I also know like I'm bearing like, here's what I did. I know there's probably some big mistakes that you're going to find here. And so it's, you got to be really brave, I think, to coach, and really brave to kind of put yourself out there. But I think for those of us that I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm as humble as can be. And like, please, if somebody sees a mistake I'm making, by all means, tell me so I don't keep making it. And that's what a good coach will do is, you know, in a tactful sort of nurturing way, like, hey, this doesn't seem to be working. We thought it was a good idea. What's an alternative? Let's figure another way out of this thing. And sometimes it's heartbreak. Sometimes it's like, God dang, like I thought that was going to work. And that was, you know, in my mind, it was perfect. Well, it didn't. So what do we do now? And that's, I'd sweat during some of my business. Some of those
you know, while talking this, I remember my, you know, personal experience with my first mentor. Okay. There was like 2 things that he told me, and like, it literally, you know, like at that point I was thinking like, I'm literally in a wrong, like, you know, wrong field and wrong time and wrong place. And I'm just a wrong guy, you know, kind of thing. So he told me, it's like, okay, let's say like somebody's going to Starbucks. They're paying like $2.50. They're getting their coffee. They're drinking it and stepping outside stepping out the door, right? Now that person comes in after a week, scratching his head, saying that, oh, I might think your coffee had something and I need my $2.50 back. Is that guy, like, you know, is Starbucks going to give it back? No, right? But in your system, Medicare scratches their head after 5 years saying, oh, I think something was wrong. Not, you know, necessarily it was wrong, but now I need my money back. What kind of business are you in?
A crazy one.
I was like, wow, that was a like very tough question, right? Okay, now I started thinking like, am I in the right business kind of thing, you know? And then like insurance pays you like $70, $80, right? When you pay your staff $40, $50, depending upon, you know, where you are, plus your overhead, building, front desk. So this guy told me like, what are you doing exactly here? Like, it looks like to me you are doing some social service. Because somebody is paying you, you paying out, and there's nothing left for you. And if you keep doing this way, you know, I see you going broke. And he was right.
Yep. Yeah, and those conversations are, sweet man. That's the tough reality if you are going to follow like the path of purely the traditional health insurance based model. And I think that eventually what happens is it encourages people to, you know, rely possibly too heavily on rehab assistants and rehab aides and techs to, in order to, you know, pay somebody a little bit less to kind of cover some of what, you know, a treatment that should actually be done by a therapist. And I mean, there's been, you know, through the years, there's been, you know, some problems with some big companies that have, you know, gotten in trouble for, you know, people that weren't therapists that were billing for therapy. And so it's a slippery slope. And so I would prefer instead to even, you know, I don't even want to play in that game if I can help it. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
take Medicare in part for that. And we also, in my practice, we don't have aides or technicians or assistants. I mean, all we have are OTs and PTs, period. And it's all hands-on, one-on-one care. And so is it, you know, could I theoretically make more money if, you know, I tried to hustle through and get some rehab techs in here to do therapy or, you know, assistance? Yeah, I probably could, but that's not the model that I'm building. And
Mm-hmm.
so I am not going to play by those rules or be influenced by those, and instead be driven by what I think is the highest value service that we can bring. And since I'm creating it and I'm creating the rules, I'm going to make it in a way that's financially viable. Staff are happy, clients are happy. I mean, got 150 5-star reviews online between Google and Yelp and Facebook and stuff. I mean, we're doing something right for a small practice. And I feel like our success is because specifically I said, being in this box is not going to work. I have to get out and I have to do something bigger and unique and something really different. And so it's not good enough to me to say like, you know, I'm going to open up a better PT practice. It's like, well, there's PT practices. I mean, I can throw a rock out my front door and hit 3 different PT practices. I mean, they're all over the place. And so it's so hard to say one PT is better than another PT or an OT is better than another OT. And the idea is that we all graduated and took a national exam. And so there should be a baseline where we're all at. So the service that you're providing should be something that is different and unique, not just better.
But adding the
Because
value.
that's yeah, there has to be some value proposition is really unique to you. And so, yes, we provide PT, and yes, we provide OT, and other people do up and down the street. But people come to us because of the way we package it and the way we provide the service. And so,
Yeah.
I think that takes some, you know, thoughtfulness on how people are going to do that. But it's possible. We're living it.
But you know, somewhere down the line, people are getting trained in the wrong way, I would say. They're just I think it's a system and everything else that is like you know, incentivizing. Like there's no incentive for quality work. If somebody does a
Mm-hmm.
crappy work, Medicare pays $100. Somebody does excellent work,
Yeah.
hands down, still $100. So
Yeah.
over the period of time, people are just getting, oh, if I do this like 30 minutes, I'm still getting it. Why would I spend 45 minutes when I'm still getting the same money? So, you know, the quality of care is getting compromised in that the whole process, because people are finding more and more ways to do less work and get the same money, while
Mm-hmm.
insurance is turning around saying, okay, now I'm not going to pay $100, I'm going to pay $90.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you know, things
The
start
race
to
to the
roll over
bottom.
again.
Yep.
And eventually that model will never work when it comes to
Yeah.
patient care, because they need to get better. It's not about 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes going in and out. It's about the difference they are like you have to make in order for, you know, make it more sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's again, it's easy for me to sit here. I could wax on poetic about the problems with health insurance. And I think that what's tough is we don't have that much influence over it, if at all, if any influence at all, which is, um, again, why I'm happy to kind of coach people to stay in the system if that's what they want to do, because there's definitely some fundamental, you know, business development things that all businesses need to go through, and I can help people navigate that. But also it's a really, you know, if people are thinking kind of financial freedom at some point, you really may need to think about ways to at least diversify your income portfolio.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean not seeing Medicare people or not taking insurance. Like, no, you can still, you know, definitely if that's your population, then by all means do that. But recognize that you are bound by rules that are going to be dictated to you. And so when Medicare or private insurance says, okay, we're now cutting everybody's reimbursement by 8%, that's not a negotiation. You are literally just you just got an 8% pay cut, even though you may be at the height of your career and having amazing outcomes. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really encourage people to consider, like, how can you fortify the services that you're providing and diversify, which is what I'm doing in my practice. And so, I mean, there are some insurances that I just simply don't take, and I never signed a contract with them because the reimbursement is so insulting. Yeah. And so those people will come in. Some of them, the first question is, do you take my insurance? And if the answer is like, well, our answer is often, what is your problem? We're going to tell you if we're a good match. And oftentimes people come in because they were referred specifically to see somebody on my staff. And for a lot of people, they say, if you don't take my insurance, that's fine. I'll just pay cash. Great. We'll take your cash. But they're here because we have a reputation that we built. And that helps us diversify again. Like, I'm not going to cheapen my service or discount my service. I'm going to provide high service and be selective about what insurances we take.
Yeah. And exactly, like right now, we are not in a position to dictate insurance terms, or we are not big enough, to have recommendation kind of thing. But that does not mean that you just suffer through the system. Even I personally own 2 Medicare home health agencies, but I do have a division who handles the private pay, like private duty care. And then I own an outpatient clinic, which is like almost 60% is a private pay. Only 40% is, insurance, but I have decided my baseline. So if that insurance meets that baseline, yeah, they're more than welcome to, provide us, like, the contract we do, and we are happy to see their clients. But as you said, like, there are some insurance who just in the market of lowballing. No, we don't want to just take it. Simple.
No, and I wish more therapists. I mean, part of the, mentoring coaching with people is trying to empower us, as a field of rehabilitation to recognize, like, you are so much more valuable than what you're paid. Mm-hmm. And to find a way to express that and to get kind of, make what you think you deserve. And really that takes, for most people, kind of, I think stepping outside of, what a 9-to-5 job kind of is for therapists, and thinking outside the box and being creative, and realizing that, if you can get through OT and PT school, you're probably a pretty smart person. And so if you're pretty smart and you're pretty motivated, there are other options out there for you, ways to diversify and ways to kind of, expand. People sometimes talk about like side hustles and things like that. I mean, you can kind of explore all of that stuff that may, really, give you satisfaction from a career perspective. Mm-hmm. But it's almost painful to think of. I know so many people who are excellent therapists that are just committed to like staying in, facility and retiring in that facility. And that's great. I mean, if they're happy, it works for them. But in the sense, it kind of pains me to think, like, man, you could have done twice as much if you step out, you're not hitting your head up against the ceiling, and you can do anything. But it's not for everybody. So it's I mean, I'm certainly glad some people want to be employees, because I need some for myself.
Oh, yeah. But like, it's a journey. So it's not that, okay, you are out of college and you can start all your business and, you can be successful. No, like, you have to have at least basic skill. Even I did it. I worked for 3 years for somebody just to learn the basic skills or basic, stuff that is still not being taught in school. Like, there's a setting knowledge too that you need, like how outpatient works, or how nursing home works, or how hospital works, stuff like that. So you need those experiences. It's not that, you, okay, just go out and open up a business and you'll be successful. No, those experience comes handy when you are running all those experience, like, your own practice kind of thing. So it is a transition that everybody makes. Somebody makes sooner, somebody makes later. That's a matter of question. But like, that's a journey that you have to take. That's the moral of the story, right? So okay, I think we can talk all day, but let's just try to squeeze it out and say, like, what will be the advice you want to give to people, like a new grad or somebody fresh out? Your words of wisdom kind of thing.
So if you are a new grad or a newer therapist, I would say I would say that one of the most important things you can do is find a couple of mentors, or at least a mentor that can help you develop your clinical skills. I think that the foundation of what I'm able to do is because I have a strong base in clinical skills. So I think if you're going to potentially develop into something down the road, whether it's an entrepreneurial experience, it's nice to have that foundation of hands-on skill. So that's first and foremost. And I think that if you match up with somebody who has a little more experience, you will also realize the value of having people that have kind of already trudged a road before you, and so can help you, again, navigate that safely. And I think be open to criticism, or be open to feedback. I think that my development of my business now has morphed through, and before I opened, when I would kind of run my ideas through my friends, my friends and family, and some of the ideas, it just didn't quite click with them, and they gave me some feedback that made me reflect, and maybe just change my vocabulary, or change the wording that I'm doing, or the way I had planned on providing services. But that's stuff you can't do on your own, and if you're the smartest people are the ones that ask all the questions. So if you find somebody that, there's a reason why the smart kids always sit in the front of the class. And I think that the more I've practiced, I started off kind of towards the back, and now in the conference, I want to be the first one, because if I don't know, I want to ask. And if you can be surrounded by people that are supportive in that and really encourage this dialogue, it's priceless. That's the most important thing.
No, I think, we had a great conversation, and thank you for your time. We did cover, a lot of stuff that was really, interesting and intriguing at the same time. And I hope, people who are going to watch this video is going to learn from these things. And, at least I learned it for sure. So at least one guy is already getting useful, in terms of sharing the knowledge. So let's try to, help out. And I do have a Facebook group that I try to, manage, is a healthcare entrepreneur, where I try to, share some more side gigs, or, the healthcare entrepreneurship that I try to share, like, my journey, because at least the basic thing I have is my journey or my experience, because even my journey was, has ups and downs and stuff. So at least people can learn from it. And like, how did I made it in 32? When I decided, what I decided my goal was to get things I have when I was 35, but I did it in 32. So I was fortunate enough. At the same time, I had my two businesses fail too. So I learned from it.
It happens. Right.
It happens. It's a proud part of the process. You lose money, big or small. Maybe your businesses will fail too, big or small. But that's the process that you have to go to or grind through in order to get to the point where you have the confidence that, okay, I got it. Like when you stand up in front of camera or audience, now your confidence is so much pumped up that, okay, because you have a proven record. Like, if somebody questions you, that, okay, you'll just go and check out my clinic and you will find exactly what I'm saying, right? So that boosts your confidence so much when you have a proven record. I can still imagine myself, like when I was fresh out of college, and orthopedic, like ortho rehab is my thing. Like for some reason I got attached to it, and 3 to 4 years down, I got a hang of it. So every patient, doesn't matter if like grade 3 trauma, or the crush injuries, or auto injuries, fractures, complicated fractures, I know I have that skill and confidence enough, and that shows, and that started showing. So the best orthopedic doctor in New York City hired me to work for him, because the confidence that I had, and patients started seeing it. One of the patients recommended my name to him. Actually, I was like, okay, I saw this guy, and he was really pretty good, and he called me up saying, okay, I want to see you. And then he offered me like my first job when I was doing my internship. It's like, okay,
that's awesome.
I'll get it. But
you're on something.
I think I will wrap up our episode for now, but we'll definitely catch up with more Facebook Lives and some more videos down the road for sure. I would personally like to thank you, Aaron, for your time. I know everybody is super busy, and the more businesses you have, more busier you are.
Well, I
So,
appreciate the opportunity. This has been a fun talk.
yeah, thank you so much.